So on the Blender site, they had these logos that they wanted us to use for community tutorials and stuff like that. So I thought it would be fun to actually play with the concept. So for this one, instead of playing with the black and white one, which is perfectly bland for someone like me, we'll actually choose something more cheerful like the SVG. And let's actually backspace and go back a page, and we're going to right click and save this link as something. And we'll just save it to this power save location and copy the path. And we'll press Control N and we'll make a new file. And I'm just going to press X and delete. And from here, we're going to import the SVG. And so because I already have the path in my clipboard, I can just drop it here and we'll just paste in, I guess this one's called white. We'll import it. And the thing about curves is they always import super freaking small. And also with these Blender ones, they import kind of looking terrible because of Z fighting. So I tend to spend a moment just moving things around to just get everything to look right. And let's take a look at what we have here and think about if we need to delete anything. And really, it's just a matter of us having all the levels just stacked up correct. I mean, I don't even know if we need this white circle in the back, but you know, let's have some fun with it. So I'm going to select all of this, and we'll select this last one at the end by just holding Shift and clicking it to make it the active selection. And we'll just press Control P, keep transform, and now we can just scale this single object up and everything will scale. And so, you know, when it comes to curves, I'll press Shift S and we'll choose cursor to geometry, which doesn't appear to exist. So let's try selecting these 2 points and we'll snap our cursor here, and then we could choose origin to selection. And it looks like that's not an option either. So we'll go under object and we'll choose set origin to 3D cursor. And now we can actually reset this and scale it universally in the scene. So this is kind of me just kind of remaking the example I showed at the beginning of this. Even though I didn't plan on it, I figured it was easy enough to create in the first place. We should actually be able to get in here and have some fun with creating it a secondary time. So I'm going to clear parent and keep the transformation because things are looking good, you know, with the sorry, I've talked myself to death over the course of this content. Sometimes you got to stop and just neigh like a horse, you know what I mean? Anyways, back in the game. So we have this shape, and this shape is built up out of curves. And so whenever I first was doing this, I tried a plethora of things to do, and I do want to try a plethora more. So the first thing we're going to do is power save this as logo fun. You know, we'll just call it logo fun. We'll power save that just in case we crash or something, because things are going to get real weird around here. So we're going to press H and hide that circle. I just don't think we're going to need that. So I'm just going to press H and hide it. And let's actually take this shape and we're just going to convert it to a mesh. And this is what we receive. So this is Geo. You know, it's Geo. That's really the best we can say. So the first thing we're going to do is just clean the mesh. Cleaning the mesh almost seemed like a good idea, except it wasn't. So let's try another way. Let's try shift clicking mark, and inside the select tool, let's press C to clean it. And we see that that also cleaned it a little harshly. Let's press F and just convert it all into a face. And that actually is the best cleaning that we're going to get without having to modify the parameters. I mean, we could go under clean mesh and basically clean everything. And by this point, if you've watched all the videos and you're watching me do this, you should have a pretty good bearing on what's happening here. If not, then I failed you and I apologize, but you know, I tried. So we're going to choose, what is it, snap, and turn on snapping pies because life is just terrible without them. I don't know what Shift S is without snapping pies. So now we got our origin back to geometry. We probably want to actually get our origin to this area right here, so it's precisely in the center. And so right now we have this, we kept our curvature, we kept our form, but we lost all the geometry in the middle of this. And so this is where something like dice would come in. We'll use dice, but we'll apply to scale. And then we go into dice, and dice comes up a little more logically. And we also want to dice it on the X and the Y. And so as we roll the wheel, we're just adding more segments, and we'll just choose to knife project. And so now we have this nicer geometry happening here. So the next thing I want to do is actually use these letters to cut out what's happening behind here. So I tried a variety of methods for this last time, and so I want to take you guys through the same adventure that I went through and learn from it, hopefully like I did. So I would try to use a knife project, you know, because I would shift click this and it would just knife project it. And we look at this mesh just individually, and we actually got lucky this time and was able to actually knife project every single letter through. But last time I actually had to use the knife tool to knife through lines of basically where every letter would be to get the most optimal solution. But it looks like we can just delete this and we have a very nice, pleasant, clean, sharp cutout of the Blender words. However, we also did lose what we had here with our words. So let's actually undo just a bit. I mean, we got all our undo set up. So I'm just going to shift duplicate that. And then we're going to knife project it again by just holding shift. We don't need that anymore. And we don't need these faces on the inside. And I think I just saw an indication of mesh machine. So we are going to go in our preferences, locate mesh machine, and we're just going to make sure that we don't have the symmetry settings on because they will wreak havoc on my muscle memory. So we will just continue on, and we have our shape cut out, which we can play off of later. We'll use this thing too, and we'll do the same trick. We'll shift D, duplicate it, and I'm actually going a little bit off of the script here and doing things differently because I see that, you know, I can get away with a little bit more. Maybe Blender changed since yesterday or something, but maybe I just wasn't maybe I wasn't using curves right. Who knows? But we can just keep shift clicking knife and just pressing X to delete the piece that we duplicated, and then pressing X and deleting these faces in order to create a system where once these letters fall, we can actually see behind it. So, you know, we're just actually having some fun with Blender here. If you're not able to follow along, that's perfectly fine. I mean, if you're not able to follow along, story of my life, no one can ever follow along. So consider me giving up on that. So we'll press Control A, visual geometry to mesh. So now everything is a mesh at this point. We're going to press Control J to join everything together, which may not be the best idea, but we are going to add a modifier and choose to put a solidify on this shape, which should show up. Let's try that again. And it probably is a matter of applying the scale in order to see solidify taking place. And we see that solidify is working okay. However, with this geo being this geo, it's just not going to work out. So let's try our buddy clean mesh. And it looks like clean mesh is going to do its job today and actually make things look nice. So we're just back in business. So we can sharpen this, and we have very nice thickened shapes without any sort of compromises, which is important because we don't want to reveal what's behind the logo until it's time. So now we have this set up. We have these solid shapes, and we can actually proceed to the next step, which is Control A, visual geometry to mesh, and we can just select everything and just press P and just change everything to loose parts. So now everything has its own separation. We can just, I would show you how we can select every individual thing, but that would require that I reselect everything. We're going to press Shift S and just choose origin to geometry. So now each of these things has their own origin set because we chose origin to geometry. And also what this means is that if we select everything and we press spacebar and we choose rigid body, we can just add active, and this will basically make everything a rigid body. And that's really all it takes to add a rigid body to something. So the next thing is we want to possibly put up a wall in between the back part of this and the words. So let's actually grab these two elements and let's put some distance between them, because we're not going to have shadows displaying, or else it'll give away the illusion that we're kind of trying to create. But we have this set up, and now when we press Shift A, it just drops down. So far, so good. And keep in mind, of course, that I'm also trying to keep this tutorial timely, so I could try to explain things slower, but people would also complain about me taking too long to explain things. So it's always a conundrum between dealing with certain people and dealing with certain people. So we will just add a rigid body to this as well, and we'll mark this as a passive. But instead of passive, we'll set this to be mesh, just to ensure that whenever it's calculating it, it's completely accurate, even though it's just a plane. And if we just drop this, we see that everything just falls away. And that's because everything else has a convex hull, which means there's some simplified bounding volume around this. To change everything at once, we're just going to change this to mesh and then right click and choose copy to selected. And this should make everything a little more accurate. So we go back to frame 1 and we let it fall, and it almost has kind of a playful look to it, you know, just like Blender, just boom. But this is just the start. So what we want to do is actually activate each of these letters to fall off at a different interval to give the effect of ding, 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 ding. And keep in mind, we're trying to keep this, of course, timely, and this is just one of the ways that I try to have fun with Blender. So what we want to do is go to frame 1, which is right here, and we're going to just turn on keyframing. And what we want to do is toggle dynamic and right click and choose copy to selected, and maybe press I for that and copy that to selected. So hopefully everything should have a keyframe for this dynamic being toggled off, and it looks like we may have to do that manually. I'm sure there's a way in Blender that we could actually copy this manually to everything, or even a button we could click that's off on the side that ensures that this is happening, but we will just do it the hard way for today. So now that we have dynamic keyed on everything, if we play our timeline, we see that nothing happens, and this is exactly what we want, because when we jump to, say, frame 10, we can key this to turn on. We can jump to, say, 30. We can select the next letter. We can key it to be on. We can jump to 50, select the next letter, and we can key it to be on, and so forth, jumping to 70, moving to the next letter, keying it to be on, selecting the next letter, moving to 90, keying it to be on, and selecting the next thing, and moving to the next interval and keying it to be on. And sometimes I'll go through these workflows of just mundane repetition to just ponder things that could be automated inside of Blender itself, such as this. I mean, how many times will you do this before it actually drives you crazy? However, I do have commotion, which I could be using at this time, but for something like this, sometimes a manual touch is what's needed. So we're going to select everything, and I see that the frame interval is just too big, so I'm going to press S 0.5, and now we'll let it play back, and it looks like the letters drop off at a better pace than they were before. And so with these two things, we can finally deal with them. So we want these to fall off, and then finally we want the O in the middle to fall off. So once that falls, this one can then be set to basically come alive, which will then fall off. And then at maybe 110, we can actually key this thing to also fall off. So now this thing comes off, basically revealing the black underneath. So if we just sit here and we just let this play, it will just drop off the letters of Blender, basically revealing the black background beneath. And let's say we didn't actually want to reveal that. Let's say we want to take this a step further. So we're continuing on with this, you know, just letting it play a couple of times so we can just really take in what we have here and decide where we want to go. But also to see this in the right light, we maybe want to turn off shadow and cavity, just so it looks like they're just falling off kind of more organically. In fact, they almost look like they're falling off with a little bit of a gap. And I feel like there could be a little bit more activity for these things whenever they fall off. So let's talk about spaces. We're going to add a cube. You know me, I've added multiple cubes over my career inside of Blender, and this cube is no exception. We're going to take this cube and scale it out, and we'll grab this face, extrude it up, and press SX0. And, you know, you might be thinking, hey, you just taught me the entirety of hops. Why are we doing this like a chump? Well, let's do it the right way. Let's press Q, go under flatten, and then roll the wheel in order to find the axis we want. And then maybe grab one of these edges and dissolve it just to get things right. And so continuing on, the next thing from here is we can go to Rigidbody. And we want to mark this one as a passive because we don't want it to move. And we also want to use it as a mesh so it accurately uses the form that we've given it. And we also want to shade this as a wire so we never see it in render or anything, and we could just use this as kind of a utility part. And I'm just rotating it and then giving it some abstract rotation without really being very attentive to it to just see what we can position on the fly with this. And now if we let this play back, we should get a little bit more randomization whenever these things hit the ramp, which can just result in a little bit more interesting of a playback. In my original one, I actually had it positioned a little bit more along the border so that whenever things fell, it seemed like they weren't actually touching anything. They just were just falling off a little more randomly. But it is just something I found myself doing whenever it comes to creating these animations to get a more interesting effect going when it comes to how they fall off the screen. I mean, we could just have that fall straight off, but you know, let's actually rotate this a little bit and experiment with different possibilities of what this could be, right? You know, we have this looking like this, and then we will just allow this to drop down. That looks kind of cool, and then bam, the logo falls off. But we may want to have this angled in a way that really facilitates falling. So we'll just go back with our angle. The logo's real interesting, and it just falls right off. So if we hide it and we let it play back, we just take in what we're looking at here and what it looks like, and it just looks like the logo's just falling apart. So the final thing for this particular tutorial that I just want to keep simple for today is getting a rim around all the parameters. That was another thing that I struggled with over the course of creating this, and I didn't actually duplicate my letters to give myself a fair chance. So we actually have to derive these meshes and play off of them. So I'm going to just select all of them and then Shift D, and then we'll press numpad slash to go into local mode, or just regular slash that's next to your Shift key on your keyboard. And inside of local mode, we're first of all going to go to frame 1. We're going to delete every keyframe that's visible. We're going to basically remove Rigidbody. We can Control J join this together and look at it from top view, and I'm just going to remove the back faces of this just for simplicity's sake, allowing us to look at the front. And all we really want to do is just press I to inset this ever so slightly to just give us a rim, and then we can just press X and delete the faces that are selected, and this is all we need. And I just want something that's behind it, so whenever they fall off, it's not just showing just a pure background. There's something a little bit more to it. So we'll assign a blank material just so it has some flair, and ideally when you do it right, you shouldn't see anything. But what happens is that whenever they fall off, there's like a nice little border behind it, which I was planning on making light up or something. We could just replace the blank material down the road because it's just a placeholder. But now we have our Blender logo just kind of falling out to show what is going to be the greatness behind it. So let's just press Control S, save that, and we have this collection thing happening where we have layer 1, which is basically nothing, and then we have collection 2, which is everything. Let's actually move everything over to collection 1. So now collection 1 is this, collection 2 is nothing. We can just delete hierarchy, which still leaves us completely unaffected. We let our animation play back, everything's just fine, hunky-dory, no issues there. In fact, if we want to even make things a little bit cooler, we could, you know, grab this thing, maybe grab this face and the little adjacent face that's required and pull that out. And this should result in the letters actually falling off onto this piece, which kind of happened. Let's try that again. We pull it out even more. We're still looking at it from the front, and there we go. That's the intended result that I want to see. Something a little more heavy happening. So to top this off, let's finally put some gears behind it. So I'm pressing Control S to save this. With these power saves, I tend to give them to my patrons in large collections over the course of the month, or to operatives on the Discord to just keep them inspired. But we'll jump to collection 2, and we're just going to Shift A, add a cylinder. And with our cylinder, we're just going to quickly turn it into a gear. And by turning it into a gear, I mean grab these faces on the side, press Alt E, and extrude individual faces, and press S and Z to scale them down. And maybe grab these two faces, press I for inset, Alt S to push, I for inset, right click, bridge, and then we'll put a loop in between, and we can actually shift click EM macro in order to use EM macro to push that out. And we can even grab this loop and press S, Shift, and Z in order to push this in, and grab this loop and just add a loop there and extrude it out and do with it what we must in order to make this unique. So we've just basically created a very quick gear. Another thing is that my viewport is set to EVLQ, which I could tell because there's no shading happening. So I think we turned it off for the purposes of looking at our presentation, but we can turn it back on just for the purposes of making this gear. So we're just making this very simple gear, and just to help this thing be a little more gear, we're going to select this and add a bool in as a difference with a cube, and we'll do it one more time just to really bring the point home. So if you guys are still mystified to how this guy inserts cubes and performs booleans with them, then I recommend that you start with video 1, please. So we'll press Alt X and we'll mirror this to the other side. So now we have our prototype gear, and we'll also mirror it on the Z as well just to get a good shape going. We'll press Control A to get rid of any modifiers that we have, so we can just transition to the next level of our journey. And so that part is actually going to be, first of all, us filling the center of this cylinder. So the easiest way to fill this would be to select this, press QOT, and with that we can just go in and select cylinder, choose equalize radius only, and now we have this cylinder in the middle that we can bevel, press 1 and lower the segments to get a really hard transition. Maybe convert to mesh, select both of these and join them together. But we also want to lower the auto smooth to make that accommodate. So basically we're just filling in the hole, and we've made this little gear. So I'm not the best gear maker. I probably should have looked at some gears in advance. In fact, if we want to do something about that, we can select these two faces, choose to get not polygon sides, I believe it's perimeter, and we can just press Alt S and bring these in order to get a very different type of result. But I still want to possibly grab these loops all the way around, and we'll just sharpen those as well in order to give it a hard transitional shading. And we're just having some fun with the idea of just making a simple screw or a simple cog here. And so we'll press N, and under rotation we see that moving the Z rotation is probably the ticket to getting what we want. So we will go in here and we'll type in a script like pound frame times 0.15, actually 0.05 or 0.6. So now we have this gear that's turning, and all we're going to do at this point is just duplicate this gear and use it for whatever we're trying to do. So we're just rotating this and positioning it in different areas. Whenever you rotate it on the X, you'll find that you're not able to do that. So I will copy the driver and then delete the driver, and then we'll rotate it on the X again. But we see that we want it to actually rotate on the Y. So we'll paste the driver in the Y, and we see that we're able to have gears in different areas for performing vertical rotations as well. And we just duplicate these around. I mean, I'm no gearologist. I'm sure there's people out there more mechanically inclined than me who are looking at this wondering, how could this guy do this? This is really turning my gears and is about to jump out of a bell tower right now. But for us, we're just trying to make it through to the end of the day and the end of this tutorial, which is the end of a very long tutorial, which I'm pretty sure many of you watching are possibly also wanting to end. So we will just get our gears to just fill in the blanks, just having some fun. And these little gears always are the fun ones for me. We could bring these in, and if I had more time to adventure, we could be using constraints in order to have these rotate actually the way that they're supposed to, because constraints do make this sort of thing very fun. But drivers are also equivalently fun in creating something that shows the illusion of movement while also not requiring you dealing with keyframes, which can sometimes be a little bit daunting and another form of data that you have to maintain. So that's one of the reasons that I'm such a big fan of drivers myself. So we'll rotate this one, place it here, do another one, place it here, and maybe do one more place here. Just really getting these gears to turn and shift. We could also have some that are rotated sideways just to really get these gears turning in the right direction. And the more that you add these, the more interesting your system gets. So we could actually grab some of these pieces and just move them down to just kind of recess it from having any sort of dominant protruding happening. And this might help us make it through to the end of the day a little bit quicker. So we're just moving things down, and this is basically our gear array. And so we can name this collection gear array. And I see that the time is already getting late and my pumpkin is turning into a carriage again, meaning it's driving time. So we got to actually get back to our main scene. So we'll duplicate this one, maybe put an itty bitty one right here, put an itty bitty gear here, put another itty bitty one there, put another itty bitty gear here. Really just got to embellish the itty bitty gears. That's the theme of today, is just itty bitty gears just doing their job, getting in here, just turning and learning. And hopefully this video has done that for you. Just turn the gears of your imagination and get you thinking about some of the possibilities of what you can do when you're using hardops, or even just Blender in general. A lot of the stuff that I talk about is stuff that hopefully you can take away of any software discipline, or even if you're using our tool or not, or even tools that are similar. But now that we have all of these here, we can just lower some of our gears to get just a particular type of look. We probably went a little bit overboard with our gears, but you know, if we're not turning, we're not learning. So we just got our gears just twisting and turning, and we're looking at it from the top, and we have a pretty nice box of gears here. This would make a very nice insert for KidOps as well. But to tie this tutorial off at the end, we can actually go back to our first collection where our letters are falling off, and we can press Shift A and insert gear array. And so we're going to press RX90 to rotate this around, and all we have to do is just position these to fit behind the letters as we want them to appear. So we'll pull this back, and we'll grab this black sheet as well and pull this back as well, and just grab the gear array and just scale this up and then move it over. And we're just duplicating this over and over, and we can just rotate this however we want these gears to be presented, because you know the gear police won't be coming to arrest us tonight. However, we will never know. If they do, it'll be like clockwork. But we're just rotating these to fit, and we definitely want to have enough gears to feed all that we aim to do with this. So we're just going to duplicate this and move it over. And then finally, I'm just going in the back and grabbing these, and we're going to duplicate them down some more, duplicate them down some more again, and then finally duplicate them here. So we can press C and just deselect this by just middle mouse clicking, and then I'll duplicate this down one more time just to make sure that these gears get what I'm talking about. In fact, I see some peeking out the side, these naughty little gears. We'll move them over, and now we can actually go back and turn off cavity and shadow again, because I will just keep turning off EVHLQ anytime I see it. But we'll press Control S to save, and let's play back what we have. We'll turn off viewport visibility, and basically the letters will fall off, revealing gears in the back, showing the power of Blender being assembled. And Blender is a program that's built up of so much power that saying that it should be optimized for hard surface is cruel to those who use it for organics and people that use it to make llama animations and animations about washing machines and dragons that make people sad and old and die, and tears of steel and things like that. I mean, Blender is capable of so much, and our tool only aims to just show that even in the hard surface realm, if Blender were focused in it, it could also be quite effective in it. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and with that we can wrap this up, and I'll see you guys next time.